Tom Flood, Trini and I welcome you to How to Make Your Story Stand Out in our series of storytelling presentations. And as people come in a little bit late, go ahead and tell us who you are in the chat box. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and begin the presentation. Can you guys see that okay? There we go. There's Tom. So welcome, everybody. We're excited to have you here. Today, we're going to be talking about how to make your story stand out. And first, of course, always, we want to thank you for doing the work that you're doing, whether you're a professional, you're brand new at this, whether you're a survivor, whether you are a victim yourself, whether you're an advocate and a survivor, however you got here, welcome. We're excited that you could be with us and be a part of our ongoing series. So today, I want to have Trini jump in and share a little bit about herself and her marvelous organization, who are our sponsors for this year-long series that is so exciting. Trini, please, welcome. Tell us who you are and what you're about.
And well, my name is Trini Willerton, and please forgive me, I'm a little bit under the weather, so I'm not as excited as I typically would be. But I'm very grateful for Tom and for Melissa for doing this. And well, I started this 5 years ago. I started advocating 5 years ago after being hit by a careless driver. And yeah, I'm just very grateful to be alive and for the opportunity to change things for the better. And I've encountered a ton of wonderful people that some of whom are here today, like Preston, and that's all I have to say. The rest is like there, but anyway, so thank you everybody for being here, and I hope that you find this really helpful, because I have. And yeah, we need an army of storytellers.
We do, and that's what we're making this year, aren't we? So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Tom Flood here, but he's going to tell us more. So I just wanted to share a little bit about who he is. We have been friends online on Twitter, I think 3 or 4 years now. And I was just blown away by his creative work and his viral tweets and his storytelling skills as an advertising creative. So I'm going to let him tell more about that. Very briefly about myself, because I sent information to you in the email newsletter about who the heck I am and why I'd be hired to do this. We focus in Petal Love on teaching you communications skills, and we focus a lot on storytelling. And in specific, we focus on teaching you how to tell short, compelling 2 to 5 minute stories, personal stories, as part of your storytelling or communications toolbox, because it's our belief that learning how to tell these stories will revolutionize the important work that you're doing. Because stories, the ancient art of storytelling with modern technology, that's what science proves is the superpower. By using stories that are shaped and formed in very particular ways, you can open hearts, change minds, and most importantly, move people to really positive and different actions. So this is part of a series, as we shared with you, that it could be me as sponsoring. If you've missed any of them, don't worry. You can see them on our YouTube channel. You will get an email newsletter right after this class with the link to that. So in August, we talked about setting intentions. September, we got into the nuts and bolts of crafting a story. And now we're talking about how to make your story stand out. Next month, we're going to start talking about media relations. But let's talk about how to make your story stand out. And today, what we're really going to be talking about is that your delivery is important as your content. And what we mean by that is that the how is important as the what. And this can be really hard for smart, dedicated, passionate people to hear, because we want the details, we want the data, we want the research to just be proof itself of why we need to create safe streets. And unfortunately, the human brain is wired for storytelling, and it is the most charismatic, dynamic storytellers who are the ones that we remember and who are the ones that move us to positive action. So today we're gonna delve into some ways that you can start doing that with your own stories. always, because we know that we have people here who have been survivors of tough crashes, or we are victims and so family members, your mental health is number one. So if you don't want to be on camera, you don't want to participate in the activities that we ask you to participate in, go at your own pace, put your oxygen mask on, take care of yourself, because that is the most important thing for us here at Petal Love. So the first thing I want to ask you right now is for you to write down for yourself, and write in the text box, what is keeping you right now, right where you are, whatever level of storyteller you're at, what's keeping you from making your stories flourish? I've written down 3 things that I think are the key things that keep people from having their stories flourish. You might recognize one of these, or you might have one of your own, but go ahead and write in the text box one of your whatever it is that you think. And also, I wanna let you know that as we go along, if you have questions, because we're on a tight time here today, we're not gonna stop and cover those until the end, but we do have time for lots of questions and a good conversations, but I don't want anybody to miss out in their questions. So, do you feel too fragile right now, or is it still too fresh what you've been through to tell your story yet? Do you maybe think that you don't have the time? Or do you think you need new skills? Wherever you're at the right place, but take a minute to think about what it is for you. And I'm just gonna give us a minute here on my timer, and if you'd share, remember that we wanna create community here, so by you sharing where you're at, it's gonna give other people courage to share where they're at, and maybe you can find somebody who's at the same level as you. So just take a minute to think about it. Where are you at? And wherever you're at is absolutely the perfect place to be. And maybe you're in more than one place. Okay, so we just have about 10 seconds to go wrap that up. Looks like everybody's ready anyway. Now, if you said you're still too fragile, congratulations, you know yourself emotionally, good. If you said that you need new skills, fantastic, you know where you are. If you said, I don't have time, I'm gonna invite you to hear something that can be a little bit challenging. If you don't have time, that might be because of a fresh trauma. Maybe you're somebody who's been in a crash, or if you're an advocate who's never dealt with a crash like this and you can't realize why you're not taking the time to do a better job with your stories, it might be from a past trauma. So perfectionism shows up in a lot of ways, and it keeps us from really doing a good job at something that we want to do really well. It keeps us too busy to sit down and do the homework in order to become a better storyteller. So that's hard to hear, but as a recovering perfectionist myself, who used to be the one that was putting her slides together at the last minute before she was asked to speak at a conference, I can tell you I've learned not to do that anymore, and to learn how to give my presentations and storytelling time to be what they really can be. And I invite you to do the same. So there's 3 phases of storytelling readiness in my belief system, and this is the research that I've been doing for the past several years, and also as somebody who's dealing with complex trauma herself. The very first thing, if you're an advocate, or you, like I said, you're somebody who's dealing with this yourself, is that you want to have a place where people who have dealt with trauma can share their story in an informed, supportive community. This is where you can tell the story however you need to tell it, with people who've been through similar circumstances are not going to judge you for it. Ideally, you're going to also have trauma-informed resources, and hopefully, like Trini provides, you're going to have a trauma-informed expert, which is really why you should consider being part of her community. The second thing is that you want to start shaping your story for strategic use. And Tom's really going to go into this, but when you are going to tell a story to move people, you have to move from telling it the way you want to tell it to telling it the way that it's actually going to serve your purposes. The way that story structure works to open hearts and change minds is very specific. So, and that's what advocates want. And then what we're talking about today is you want to polish your stories to make them stand out. And this is where you want to get your stories so that they're flexible and nimble. Because as an advocate storyteller, one day, as Trini knows, you might be giving a story as part of a legislative session or a community feedback at a city council meeting, or you might be doing a media interview, or you might be a keynote speaker. In one case, your story can only maybe be 2 minutes long. In one case, maybe it needs to be about 6 minutes long. And then finally, maybe you want a story that's about 10 minutes long because you're giving an hour-long keynote. When you can really know your story and you know the emotional points it needs to hit, you can make it just like that. So what I want to ask you guys to do right now is think about this fall, think about your storytelling, and wherever you're at, if you're still too fragile, if you think you don't have enough time, if you're ready to learn new skills, wherever you're at, I want you to take a look at what I've shared here. And I want you to put in the text box, and then also for yourself, write it out, make it happen. Where are you at and what are you willing to commit to? So if you're feeling too fragile right now, as somebody who has been hit, or somebody in your family's been hit, or a loved one's been hit, if you're feeling too fragile to tell that story, could you collaborate with an advocacy organization to share the story? Could you commit to that? And if you could commit to that, maybe we can connect you. If not in the text box today, then you can send me a note about that. If you don't have time to really make your story be everything that it could be, what can you let go of until after you need to tell your story for an important event this fall? So you might be working on October for Pedestrian Awareness Month here in the United States, or you might be working on something for World Day of Remembrance for traffic crash victims or road traffic crash victims in end of November. Whatever it is, what could you set aside to make sure that you maybe double or triple the amount of time you spend learning skills for stories? If you need to learn new skills and you know it, watch our Pedal Love videos. Definitely, there's a lot there that you can learn from. And if you want to polish your skills even further, what I really recommend is that you find an accountability partner. This is somebody who's where you're at. Maybe they're a little below you or a little bit above you, and you're going to agree to either meet in person because you live in the same hometown, you work with the same network of people, or you're going to connect with somebody online and you're going to use Zoom and other Google Meet or whatever, and you're going to start reading and performing your stories to each other to get them to where they need to go. So what can you commit to? Write that down for yourself, and then also write that down for me, because I want to have that in our chat box. So show of hands if you've already written it down or if you're in the process. And I'll just give it a minute because we've had more people come in. So I'm going to give us a minute to do that and make sure everybody has had a chance. So what can you commit to? Great. Thank you, Mark. What can you commit to? And write it down for yourself and text it to us in the chat box. Thank you. Okay, 10 seconds to go, so wrap that up. And we're going to come back to that a little bit later. So our goal whenever we're telling a story, for whatever reason, if it's for advocacy purposes, even if it's just for entertainment, but if it's for advocacy purposes, is to create something called narrative transportation. And I've shared this with everybody before. It's also going to be in the download that I send you of my PDF on storytelling for advocates. But narrative transportation is a wonky Transportation engineer sounding term that simply means that people get lost in your story. They get so wrapped up in your story. It's so moving to them. They don't interrupt you. They don't leave the meeting early. They don't leave the conference room early. They can't wait to learn more. And that's what we all want. Now, this is not just about being of entertainment value, okay? This has scientific backing to it. They're finding that the more people are transported by a story, the more they're moved by it, they lose track of time, they can't wait to learn more, the more they are moved. So this is where you really start to open hearts, change minds, and move people to action. Now, in order for your stories to stand out, we're going to share some really key, simple points for you today. And I'm going to start with simplifying your language. So you want to distill down your ideas, and you want to make sure that almost anyone of any age and any background can understand what the heck you're talking about. Because you don't want anybody to feel left out when they hear what you're advocating for and that you're telling your story. And it's really easy when you get into advocacy to get really excited and to learn new vocabulary, and you start using it and you don't realize that your friends and your family and other people that you most want to persuade don't have any idea what you're talking about. So this goes along with it, and you want to unwonkify, which is my completely unscientific word for it. You want to de-jargonize your language. You want to stop using insider baseball. And I'm going to tell you a very short anecdote about that. So about 12 years ago, I got involved in active mobility advocacy because my friend and I was on her team, and we won the grant for Bike Long Beach, the city of Long Beach's first bike friendly campaign, the marketing campaign. And it was a big campaign. It had all kinds of things in it, advertising, storytelling, all kinds of things. And so the city was taking us around and showing us where they were going to use some of this impressive $22 million they had raised at that time. And they said, it's really exciting. We're going to have the first cycle tracks ever in Southern California. And I was like, wow, okay, it's going to fit right there. How is an Olympic cycle stadium going to fit in that part of downtown? I don't get it. I didn't understand, and I was too embarrassed to ask what they were talking about. They were talking about protected, separated bike lanes. Now, most of us now hear protected, separated bike lanes when we see them talked about and written about, but cycle tracks still comes up every once in a while, and we need to get it out of our vocabulary, because cycling here in the United States, not in the rest of the world, but in the United States, using the term cycling means athletic, and that can mean a lot of people. They think you don't mean just normal, everyday people riding their bike for fun or even to get to work. You also want to use emotional and descriptive language. So think about tuning into sense memory. What did you hear? What did you taste? What did you smell? What did you touch? What did you feel? And you want to go through your stories and make sure that you're not using the same words again and again to use for descriptions. So you want to use a thesaurus to not repeat the same words but that mean the same thing, because again, this is going to be more interesting to your audience. If you use the same word a lot, what your audience hears is just that word and not your message. Now, we're going to talk about creating visual impact and more. I think Tom and I are on the same page with a lot of things. So I'm going to stop sharing and turn it over to him. And now you're going to see a master creative at work.
Well, that's a bit of pressure there. Thanks. Wow. Okay. Those are a lot of expectations, but I will try my best. Let's see. Everybody can see the screen. That's my dog Scruffy. Okay. I'm going to move this to the side so I can't see. Okay. So yeah, thanks a lot, Melissa, for bringing me in today. Really appreciate it. So just before I start, I'll give a bit of a background before getting into some of the details of what we're talking about today, but I come at this from a marketing perspective. I don't come from transportation or engineering or academia or planning. I worked in the marketing world. And second, and maybe even more importantly, is that I come at this from just being a parent that wanted their kids to be able to get to school safely and independently. So that's the lens that I look through, and that's really what's kind of informed my perspective in this space. So I began my career working in advertising, agency side, working on automotive clients, which is extremely strange considering where I am now. But it was a really interesting time because I was spending 10 to 15 minutes cycling into work. This is in Toronto, battling dangers and drivers, and then spending 10 to 12 hours a day developing creative content and campaigns, essentially perpetuating that very culture that I was being bothered by every single morning and night when I was going home. But it's a powerful testament to kind of how powerful this kind of auto culture of hold has on us. I mean, I didn't see it, and then I was right in the middle of it, which is why I try and remember when talking to other people or communicating for campaigning, that not everyone's had their awakening. Oh geez, here I gotta click this. For me, the awakening came when I took these two kids, which are my kids, to school for the very first time. It was a total shock. Could not believe just how how dangerous it was. The imbalance on our streets was striking. And being framed up as a bit of a radical, wanting to move kids to school safely and independently really stuck with me, and a little bit of a fire, and kind of took me down this path where I am now, which I never could have predicted. But I think, as a lot of us really know in this space, once you see that imbalance, you really can't unsee it. I'm going to just move past here. So I think for communicators, and it's taking a little bit of a step back here, at least for me, it's really important to understand the context and the landscape in which we're communicating, to really understand what we're up against. What does the discussion look like? Who holds the microphone for the majority of the time in kind of the road safety, road violence, active transportation space? There's a few key players that I think it's worth understanding where they're coming from, to understand where we can fit in as advocates in telling our stories. So the first one that's very obvious, that has billions of dollars of budget, is the autos. So we'll have a quick.
We've got a higher octane coursing through our veins. We've got a stronger brotherhood backing us up. We've got a duty to unleash demon, to break out, to go all out, to literally leave our mark on the streets and strips of America. This isn't just a Dodge. This isn't just a Challenger. No, this is the most technologically advanced street legal production drag car ever. We've got a higher octane coursing through our.
Sorry. So to literally leave our marks on the streets and strips of America, that's very, very intentional and pointed language. But this is what our children, our loved ones, and our communities are up against, right? High octane, race ready vehicles, but that are street legal, right? It's grotesque. This is obviously an extreme example on this marketing side, but recklessness and aggressive driving is really baked into almost all auto advertising and marketing. We've just become extremely desensitized to it. The message has been normalized. I'm gonna skip through here. Let's go. So that's how they're marketed. We know our vehicles now are getting increasingly bigger, right? This is the Hummer, 9,000 pounds, 1,000-pound horsepower, 0 to 60 in 3 seconds, right? A total monster. Or as this journalist would say, it's awesome, right? And this, again, might be another extreme example, but we know that our vehicles are trending to get bigger and heavier, right? So we have these large vehicles that are being marketed recklessly. So knowing this, how would communicators in the leadership space, what would they say to combat, design deficiencies we have on our streets, and to combat this kind of marketing? What serious, and thoughtful approach would we take as, influencers, police, city? How do we communicate the gravity of the situation with the danger that comes from this deadly mix? So we'll have a look at an example.
So put your thumbs down, look both ways before crossing.
Right? Really hard-hitting stuff. It's a total joke, but it's extremely symbolic of, one, our approach to road safety. Blame and shame the pedestrian and have a laugh with the driver, of course. But the tone of this, they're laughing through it. There's one reason why a lot of people don't take road violence or road safety seriously, is because we refuse to talk about it seriously from some of these voices of influence. That's one small little tiny police department. What would a larger, say, governmental agency communicate in this space? What kind of language and framing would they use to treat this issue that really plagues our streets? It steals our loved ones and not being hyperbolic, destroys families on a mass scale. You know, what kind of thought-provoking content and creative and messaging would they share to, you know, rally the public to push for the change that's so desperately needed? Since the Stone Age, focusing on the road is all you should be yabba dabba doing, one car emoji. Hashtag distracted driving awareness month. If you guessed, you know, using a GIF with the live action Flintstone film from 1994, then I guess you would have been right. But what's not funny at all here is that, you know, 1.35 million people are killed every year on our roads, right? I can't believe we have to keep repeating this and communicate to people and try to let them know how serious this situation is. The margin of error is so small, the cost is so high, and then we have communications like this. This is Jude Strickland. He's an 11-year-old boy who was killed by a driver 2 years ago in Hamilton, right where I live. He was walking home from school in a crosswalk with the right-of-way, with a crossing guard, and a driver just blew through and killed him. You know, I show a face because it's important to humanize what's happening on our streets. But if you think of his family, all the families, you know, that have been affected by road violence, right? And then you think, and you look back and you see this, right? You see this, and then you see this. There's such a grotesque disconnect between the way we communicate, the way the voices of authority generally communicate, and the on-street realities and devastation of road violence. And that, to me, is something that I find that really motivates me in this space, and is something I'm always thinking about when I'm working on communications and creative pieces that go near this discussion and topic. So we're going to just move on now to audience for a second here. So once we have a general understanding of some of, you know, the landscape that we're communicating in, we have to figure out who we're talking to, right? It's really important. It's really obvious, I know, but it's really, really important to make sure we know exactly who we're speaking to, so we can develop an appropriate message to target that specific person. You know, are we talking to a politician? Are we talking to an opponent, a supporter, the broader community? Ideally, you know, we could have one message, singular message that could work across the board in our advocacy campaigns, but that's not always the case. You know, whoever we're communicating with, we really have to know where they're coming from and what might resonate with them. But again, it really all depends on what the objective or the goal of the campaign is. So kind of similar to what Melissa just went through, I typically like to use a three-pillar approach from a messaging and creative standpoint when developing out creative pieces and campaigns. It's not the Bible by any means, but it's kind of a general framework that I just kind of loosely base some pieces on. So number one is keep things simple. Melissa already said this. Branding, rebranding, communications, you need to be focused. For example, you know, we all want to talk about, let's say for Complete Streets, the incredible environmental, societal, economic impacts and benefits to communities. But, you know, too much information, you just will lose the audience. It just becomes overwhelming, and you just lose the person. You need to pick a clear message based on who you're speaking to and really try to stay focused. You know, a few really well-crafted words can be a lot more impactful than, you know, sometimes a textbook of information. You don't have to say everything all at once. Emotional, again, exactly what Melissa was saying. Numbers and data are great and obviously extremely important when you want to start turning policy, but we can use emotions to connect on a human level, right? That's where most people generally feel comfortable. Humor, joy, sadness, anger, whatever it may be, but something to connect and hopefully resonate on a human level. A little bit less like, we need, you know, this protected bike lane will get us X amount of ridership, and a little more, you know, with these few tiny changes, we can have, you know, your family can have this kind of lifestyle that you've always wanted. So kind of, and sometimes when I think about connecting, it's focusing on reframing, you know, what has been potentially lost by our autocentric spaces and what can be given back, what can be gained by giving them back. Many times people don't know what they're missing. I mean, I didn't, and I was right in the middle of it. Relatable. Unfortunately, this space, for many reasons, is quite toxic sometimes. So we need to build bridges where we can. We got to really, you know, cut through this and find those commonalities. Search for the things that we can connect with as people. But it's really important, but never at the expense of really, you know, assigning agency and and losing the reality and the seriousness of the situation. For example, that distracted driving awareness month. I mean, they're using the Flintstones. I'm sure the idea was, let's do something funny so people want to have a laugh and connect with distracted driving. But to me, it really misses the mark and makes really light of something that's very serious. So there's only so far you can go when you're trying to be relatable, in my opinion. So I'm going to share a couple of quick things. I know I've only got a couple minutes here, of some recent work and some older things that kind of fit within this, and then we'll just kind of chat through them after. So that's as simple as you can get. It's a kid biking down an alley. It's really not much else going on there. The music is extremely simple. It's pretty much naked. It's very sparse. The questions are simple with obvious answers that we don't need to answer because it's so obvious. This could be relatable to many people, many parents that have kids that do bike to school, that they might want them to bike to school, or that they might remember doing this activity as a kid. So it's an easily understood activity that's being shown and kind of framed up here. On the emotional side, it's a little bit moody and pensive, I think, potentially. But the cue is really obviously from the music, and then the kind of the color tone and the feel of the actual piece. This would look very different if it had a different music. So I'm just going to show something just to kind of highlight that. I've got another video here of one of the same kids biking down almost the same alley with just a little bit of a different song. And we'll try that here.
We're having trouble hearing the music.
Oh, sorry?
The music isn't coming across. So I'm seeing the video, but I'm hearing from a
okay.
couple
Well,
other people.
then there goes the whole point of that, was showing it's a bit more of an upbeat song. So it just kind of changes the tone. It's a little bit more joyous and celebratory. So I'm sorry you couldn't hear that. But it just the idea is that music really does play obviously a really big part, as well as kind of color and tone and language as well. But music can really change things. So sorry about that. I hope this one actually works. So this is a spot I did with a group in Australia called Better Streets. So I'm just going to play this for a second. I hope you can hear the voiceover.
When would be a good time to make our streets safe for our kids? In a year, 5 years, a decade? We can keep choosing later, but their childhood is now. It's time to choose now. It's time to choose better.
Could you hear that? Okay. I hope you could hear that. Again, very simple static shot of a child standing, trying to cross the street, right? Really focused message around time. And again, relatable. Yes, it's a kid going to school, something we can all kind of understand and relate to somewhat. On the emotional side, a little thought-provoking. I hope you could hear it. A little bit sad, kind of communicated through the read by the VO performer, and also a little bit of nostalgia. The fact that, you know, this simple experience of just kind of getting around, getting to school is disappearing for kids. So there's a bit of that kind of pull a little bit on that. And obviously visually we show that by the child actually disappearing. Okay. And last one. So this was done. This is the most recent thing I've actually worked on, was with the mobility justice group Noise. They're out of Washington, DC. So their goal was to provide some messages and arm youth with simple messages that they could use to bring to community, to bring to leaders, to really highlight the transportation inequities for youth. So we developed a campaign around the idea of reframing road safety. So just kind of flipping the script on what we consider road safety. The lead piece is the poster on the far left, with just that kind of, again, simple, tight treatment. There's nothing distracting. It's really calling out exactly what the issues are, and calling out that obviously road violence is no accident at all when you don't build in these very simple things that we could do. The other two pieces here are, again, I hope simple imagery and some copy that would hopefully make people think a little bit and reframe how we see our streets and how we see youth related to our streets. So that's all I have right now. And so overall, to me, it's really about knowing the landscape and the context that we're speaking in, know the audience, and really boil and distill down those ideas to something really simple that people can connect to on a human level. So that's them. And I'm sorry you couldn't hear the things. I'll never figure out Zoom after all these
Zoom constantly changes on you. So no, those were wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm actually, Tom, while I finish this up, could you do me a favor and could you find some of your like most tweeted tweets? Could you would you mind?
Yeah.
I want you to I want people to see a little bit about how viral some of your messaging has gone, if you don't mind. So I'm just to wrap mine up.
Like right now?
Well, I'm gonna have you look that up while I'm finishing, and then I'm gonna have we're gonna share that.
Sure.
So I'm gonna share my screen again and wrap up the final bits of mine. I don't think that those two things could have gone together better. This was very exciting. Thank you. Let's see if I can get my screen now to move. It doesn't want to. Let's see here. All right, come on. Okay, so when you have an advocacy story that you're telling, you always have a call to action, right? We always want to end what we're telling our story for a reason, because we want to make real change happen. And as Tom and I are both talking about, you want to make it really simple and easy for everybody to understand, right? That they want to know exactly they could be 10 years old and they want to understand exactly what it is that you want to have happen. So this is from General Colin Powell. He's talking about how great leaders offer easy solutions that everybody can understand. And I want to share a brief story with you from my husband, Charlie Gandy, who's one of the architects of the modern biking and walking movement, who was a legislator when he was 22 years old in the state of Texas. And he learned very early on that if you brought a problem to your city government, your regional government, your state government, your national government, your world government, and said, we've got to fix this, like we need safe streets, they said, thank you very much. We're so sorry for your loss. They gave you their sympathy and they said, next. But if you show up with a problem and a clear, viable solution they can understand, they are far more likely to help you make it happen. So you may all be already there with me, but I want to remind everybody to make sure if you're going to have a call to action, please have a call to action. If you're going to have one, make it clear and easy and make it a viable next step or next 3 steps that can happen to make things change. So safe streets to your city council. We want speeds reduced by this many miles per hour on these particular streets by this particular time next year, things like that. And the elephant in the room is a lot of times, I don't have time to do this. And I've been telling you that you need time to let your stories flourish. You need time to be able to do what Tom does, that great creativity. So what do you do if you don't have the time? As Tom said, you simplify it. You bring the amount of information that you're going to try to share way down. You're going to remember that the people that you're usually telling this information to are not your fans and followers. Parent teachers associations, business organizations, business Main Street associations, local governments, regional governments, state, whatever they are. Everybody has a lot of information coming at them. So keep it really simple. Don't try to be the smartest person in the room. Try to be the person that lands the most emotional, compelling argument, the way that Tom showed us how to do. Keep it really simple and emotionally engaging so they remember it. It will just be infused in them, that the story that you told. Be the person that's landing the emotions. Now, I want to ask you, how many people, raise your hands, if you were ever in a school play, if you were ever Grade, doesn't matter if it's grade school, it could be high school, whatever it is, or community theater. If you were ever in community theater, any kind of acting, you know that you had to learn your lines so well, you had to learn your story so well that you could infuse it with life. That's what you want to know. It isn't about memorizing your story so that you can just get up there and you can recite every particular thing exactly right. No, you want the emotional arc of your story memorized so that you can live it, you can be it, and you're going to be nimble. When you know it really well, then when you're in a room of people that are not such fans, you're going to know how to find that bridge that Tom was going to call it, talking about, to find the commonality with the other parents and teachers who haven't realized yet that they're part of the problem, sitting in their SUVs in the long line in front of school, where everybody's so busy inside the car, they forget, and then they run over the kids trying to actually get to class. So we need to look at ourselves with some irony and, is it humor? I'm not sure. Maybe it's irony and not the Flintstones. So yeah, you want to have this kind of audience where they cannot wait to ask you for more. So if you're not sure how to have enough time to tell the story you want to tell, make it simple, boil it down, distill it the way we're talking about, and put the emotional resonance in it, and people will want to know more from you. Now, we want to do kind of an exercise with you. And so I want to just take a few minutes here because we want to have a good amount of time to talk to Tom. So actually, what I want you to do instead of what I was going to originally have us do is I want you to write something down that you want to ask Tom how to make it more emotionally engaging, how to flip a script, how to reframe it. So let's say 3 minutes. Let's take 3 minutes right now. And I want everybody to write down a question for him. And you can text it to us and then we'll call on you. How about that? So write down a question you have. What's a story that you're going to tell? What's a call to action you're going to have? What's a campaign that you're working on for this fall that's really important to you? And you want to ask Tom a question and see if is it distilled down to where it needs to be, or could we do a slightly better job, or maybe a tremendously better job. So let's just take three minutes right now to write something down. So it could be about the emotional language you're using, could be about the visual imagery you're thinking about, the length of time that your video is going to be, something where you want to ask Tom, pick his brains about emotional engagement. And I'm actually going to stop sharing, Tom, and if you've been able to pull something up, I'm going to have you share.
Yeah, I don't really, I'm sorry, but I'm not finding exactly what
You're
I'm
not finding anything. What I wanted people to see is just how many repeats and how many shares you're getting, and how this approach of yours that's so simple and emotional is really resonating with a very broad audience. And I know Twitter's not what it was, it's X and blah, blah, blah. And we feel differently than we did before, but it was amazing to me how viral your stuff went.
Yeah, it was definitely not a part of my plan, as I mentioned before. I just thought one morning it'd be fun to take the kids on their bikes to school, and then all of a sudden kind of snowballed, and that was that. And I think a lot of people obviously feel very similar about those experiences and the imbalance on our streets. Again, I'm not an expert on streets and planning, not at all. I come from advertising, but I think that that connection to just that, the connection to the imbalance is overpowering. I've said it before and we all say it, but once you see it, you can't unsee it again. And it's staggering just how much we've given up, and how much we've sacrificed, and how many families have sacrificed, and how many kids have sacrificed, just you know, for really the expedient movement of vehicular traffic, where in the end, we know that doesn't even really improve things in the end. But yeah, it's again, being new to this space, and I guess I'm not as new as I was earlier, but just not having any sort of insight into how cities work, or you know, the polarizing divisiveness of wanting to get kids to school. Like, it was so shocking. I remember thinking or hearing some of the rhetoric around our council, which is a couple of people from Hamilton here, was just unbelievable. I was just, we just want to move a couple of kids to school. We want to add, you know, a stop sign, or we want to add a speed bump. And it was like, I remember one of our counselors being on the radio just ranting about it. It's like, Jesus, like, we just, so we had, there's some bike lanes that are right near our house that are protected by parking. And when we moved here, they were just going in, and I was like, oh, okay, well, this is good. This is great. Now I can get these kids over on this street. And then all of a sudden, you know, the counselors on the radio, the, you know, meetings about it, the counts, like all these things that I was so green and so new to this world. I had no interest in it, zero. I never went to a city council meeting in Toronto, never participated in anything. I rode my bike around, I guess, as a generally privileged 20-year-old male, just enjoying his life. But as soon as I started seeing what it was like for somebody else, and then hearing that rhetoric around councils, what like completely set me off. I was like, this is could not, it was so absurd.
What I wrote down from what you said, what I wrote a lot of notes, like I'm sure everybody has, but not everyone's had the awakening, really struck me, because we have a lot of advocates. We have a lot of people that don't know they're advocates, and we want to open their hearts and get them to, and they love their children dearly. But privilege, right? Speed is quite a drug. And privilege is quite a drug of I'm in my car and I'm in the safe space and all this kind of stuff. And we're fed all this information through advertising constantly that this is our right. And we don't stop to question whether or not it's our right. So I want to see if there's anybody who specifically, and Trini, I want to start with you if you have a thought about something that you would like his kind of his take on the emotional languages of it. And I'm gonna look here through the texts while you think about that and see what we've got there. Anybody, Sarah, I see you there. So I want to know if you've got some ideas, like what are you working on that you think you'd just like to run by his way of thinking to see how he distills it into a different way that we might really get to the heart of the matter. So I've got a question here from Tricia Smith. What's the best place to start in this journey? And what I'm going to ask you, Tricia, is where are you in location wise? Because you're saying that it is overwhelming. You're right. And you're in, okay, so Tricia, we're going to set you up, if you're not already set up with Bike Florida. We're going to connect you via email with Bike Florida, because I think that's actually the Florida Bicycle Association. That's the place to start. Even if you're not a bicyclist, that's a place to start about people that are doing work in this realm, and they're doing some really great work. So Sue Heenan, you say you want to be able to present a case for e-bike prescribing to healthcare workers. Sue, you want to come off mic and tell it? That's really interesting. And and you need an ad agency, general creative here to do this campaign for you, I'm sure. What are you thinking about, Sue? What do you want to ask Tom?
Tom. Hi, Tom. Hi, Mark. I recognize a number of people from Hamilton on here. So I want to be able to present a case to a group of healthcare workers on they're more specialists, and they see people losing their mobility every day. And I made a comment to one of the specialists, and I said it must be really hard to watch your patients, lose their mobility when there are things that are, are available that, you could get involved in and help with. And I had no idea what I was talking about. So I kind of want to take on patient perspective on this. And I'm a healthcare worker as well, but I want to take the patient perspective on this. And I want to be able to present this to people who are not maybe used to thinking about, mobility and cycling and bikes and like getting involved in policy, change, that sort of stuff as kind of the way forward.
Yeah. So this is an interest, like, again, so I'm not going to be able to have immediate answers, and I'm sorry, because sometimes these things take, sitting down with and thinking and going over. So that's, I know it's not the answer, Melissa, you want from me right now.
But these things go in all kinds of directions, I've learned, so no worries.
Yeah, I'm my approach and the way that I've always worked, because I'm kind of, unfortunately, the old school agency person, is it takes some time to sit down and think about it. And I can't, like, it's hard for me just to come up with a good solution to a communications problem like right now. Like I'm going to think about it right now, but I might not have something for you to share with you right now. But that being said, obviously, sorry, was the question more around getting people interested in policy to make that change? I
guess realizing that they have a say, like, there are things that they can actually do to get involved in policy change that can actually, they have that power to be able to, influence these policies as well, and to get involved in, like, here's what happens to my patients when this mobility loss and this certain amount of quality of life loss happens, and to be able to say, like, what can we do before that happens? And so, like, just, there are great things happening in the States and all over the place, but there are things that I think that we're not doing so much in Canada, and I'm really interested in making a push for that, and I want to make sure I do it well.
I misunderstood. I thought you were ready to kind of start a marketing campaign. So I think
No!
what I want you to do is connect
Like,
with yeah, right. That's more
I'm
of a
not right
that's
there.
more-
No.
Yeah, that's general, kind of more of a general. I can understand why that question was hard for Tom. That's probably not for this conversation, but I think the two of you should connect. And Trini, you're waving your hand. So do you have something you want to jump in and talk about?
Yes. So Tom, I mean, going back, we already have something kind of in the already circulating, but I'm really curious to see what your thoughts would be when we need to introduce to the public big major concepts that are very intricate. I mean, there's so much information, and that's what I was struggling with. I mean, and going back to your 3 points of keeping things simple, when things are not as simple, I mean, there must be a way to convey to people, and it's a really, really long, open-ended question. But specifically, I feel that, there's so much despair. There's people that don't know how much work is going on at higher levels, and I feel that if people knew and were more comfortable with the language, for example, that we use, familiarizing people with things that I know they really don't know. So, like the safe systems approach, and I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's it's what we're really basing the progress that we're going to start seeing in our country. But until people are really familiarized with that, I think there will continue to be this sense of despair. So how would you do that? How would you simplify something that is so complex and that is so important, but people need to know about? I mean, we tried. I don't know if you've seen the campaign with our buses, but still, I mean, there's opportunities where people could have more time to read, longer texts. But
yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, that so I haven't actually seen it, but I'm interested to see it. So there's like bus wraps and outdoor kind of media.
And we also have bus shelters, and we have space inside of screens inside of trains and stations. And it was decided what type of media we were gonna implement upon how much time people had to actually look at it
Right.
and engage with it. So, but
And
anyway,
and that leads back to your website, I'm assuming, or a splash page of some sort, because that, I think that, I know that is the issue, because when you have limited budget and things are very expensive when you purchase media to try to get everything out. But I think when it comes down to what the objective is, it's picking, you just, unfortunately, in some situations, you just have to pick the most important and compelling message that you can. And yeah, unfortunately, yeah, there is a way to do these things. And again, it's hard for me to answer it right here without, again, knowing too much about the campaign. But there are ways, and I think the number one thing is to really, this is the way I start everything, is work on a really strong creative and communications brief. I know it sounds super boring, but to really understand what, like, have the objective so dialed in of what you're trying to accomplish from a communications perspective, not just organizationally, but what are these communications meant to do, to be super focused and to know exactly, like, this communication here needs to do like, you have to just know what it is, because sometimes we get lost. And I've clients that in the past too that will get lost of, we're speaking about our brand, but we're also selling this car. So what are we going to focus on here? And sometimes you can't do it all, and you need to pick exactly what that campaign needs to speak about, and the number one most important communication that comes across from whatever that piece may be. So I know that's not a great answer, but I really think having something extremely dialed in and knowing exactly what the objective is and what you want the audience to do.
I think the fact that you brought up a communication brief is brilliant. And I'm going to ask you to give us a few words on that when we follow up with everybody in the email. Because Trini said wears a lot of hats, and I wanted you guys to meet very specifically, because Trini, the big thing that I want NHTSA to answer, that I asked you while you were traveling, was they need to tell us, in these big budgets for this, and they're big for us, they're not big for autos, but they're big for us. In these grants that they're giving, where do they want to see the communication and advertising and marketing campaigns go? Do they want it in the planning, or do they want it in the implementation? If people didn't get funding in the planning, could they get it in implementation? Because this is where we have an opportunity for 4 more years. And you, because you've written grants, we're thinking of collaborating on grants, to have somebody like Tom, have Tom himself, if I can wave a magic wand, be part of it. And so I think one of the most, I would say to all of you, and I'm looking at you, Sarah Canner, as well, and I would say, get grant funding for specific advertising and communications and marketing campaigns. It's hard to get. It has been in the past hard to get, because it's not what people think about in traffic safety. But this is how we have the time and space. And I've put Tom on the spot, but this is how we have the time and space to do what Tom does. And you can see he has a particular way that he thinks about it. He is a way that, when we did the campaign for the city of Long Beach, the biggest frustration we had is that we had this campaign with our communications brief and everything that we wanted, and we had a very nice look and feel to everything, and the city kept wanting to come in and go, can we take this picture here and now use it, because it's so pretty and the girl's so cute on the bike, can we use it to advertise this thing over here, but can we put blue sparklies on it? And then, and Tom, you would probably throw up, but it's like, no, you have to like keep to the message. And so I think that really, I encourage all of you to start thinking about getting communications money. And Sarah, that's what I would say to you, is like, in New York, man, if you could find a way to have a grant, you want to get people biking, and if you could do the kind of, I know New York is the #1 city for it, so it's harder, but getting bus shelters and bus wraps and things like that out there are really conversation starters. And Tom, what would you, I guess we have to end, but if in your fantasy campaign, you've worked on some campaigns very recently, and you've done some great things. Where would you want to be able to put the stories that you haven't been able to put them yet?
Yeah, I think, you know, to get these messages that we're all doing into the mainstream, a little bit more into the mainstream consciousness, just because of what we're up against with the autos, and then of course a lot of kind of backwards thinking at some not all cities, at some cities and some police departments that just do these kind of mailed in tick boxing campaigns when it's, you know, it's dark out, you know, put a fluorescent vest on, it's Halloween, watch out. It's the same stuff over and over and over. And it's everyone's numb to these messages. And and again, I know there's nothing better than changing all the systems and infrastructure. That is the goal. But if we can at least warm people to the idea of complete streets and sell it in a manner that people will actually see the benefits of, and not for the complete street sides, and talk about road violence seriously for once in the mainstream. I know we do, and a lot of people are doing a lot of that, but still we've got, you know, there's just too many examples of things being not given the weight that they so rightfully deserve. And that is the kind of, so I'm really not answering your question. I'd like to see the work that everyone's doing here more in the mainstream. And I know that's an uphill battle because of the budgets that we're up against, but it's a battle I think we have to at least, you know, get involved with and address from a communications perspective, because the way things have been framed up have been, you know, we can go down a whole other conversation, the way, you know, cycling and walking and things like that have been framed up in kind of the mainstream narrative and discussion for too long.
Right. I think what I think I want to do on the follow-up email newsletter, I'm sent out one already today, so you guys will receive that. But I'm going to follow up with both Tom and I'm going to follow up with Trini on a couple of things they've talked about at the end here. So I'm going to follow up with Tom on the creative brief information. I'm going to follow up with Trini on some aspects of her campaign that she's already done and that she's in the process of. And because especially in places where you're not New York or you're not Los Angeles, you can make, say, a bus advertising campaign dollars go far longer than you thought possible. So I'm sorry that we don't have more time for an in-depth conversation, but I want to thank everybody for this great, time that we've had here today, for Tom especially. So much food for thought, so many more questions people are going to have for you. So I'm sharing your information. They can contact you later. We'll put people in touch with each other if they haven't been in touch already. So please email me. I'm directly messaging back and forth with people. If there's somebody here that you'd like to contact with, I'm going to leave this up for about 10 more minutes. So please go ahead and give them a direct message and send them your email. We really want to keep creating community. Make sure that you check out It Could Be Me and what they're doing. And final thoughts, Trini, as we close out tonight, and then we'll get Tom's final thoughts.
No, well, thank you very much to everybody. And I'm sorry that we didn't get to talk more to people. And I'm really sorry about your wife, Greg. I mean, it's just, you know, I just, it's very, very frustrating. But thank you everybody for being here. And yeah, check out what we're doing. There's a lot of good work being done.
It's amazing what people are doing. We've had several victims here and crash survivors here. Thank you for your courage. It's what you're dealing with is so terrible and it's so hard. And I commend your courage. We just think that you are amazing. So please check out the rest of the resources that we have on at YouTube. You're going to have that in about 15 minutes. And Tom, I'm going to close out with you tonight on your final thoughts.
Well, yeah, no, thanks so much for having me here today. And sorry I couldn't have answered the questions a little bit better, but sometimes those questions just take a little more time and thought, to be perfectly honest. But the only thing I would say is that I truly do believe that, you know, every voice does really, really matter, and can be extremely powerful, because again, I ended up here very, very randomly. And yeah, I truly believe that everyone's voice, you know, has a place in this space, and we need all the voices, I think, talking together. So yeah, thanks very much for having me.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to leave it open for about 10 more minutes. If you have questions for me, go ahead and text them or email me afterwards. You're going to be able to find out how to get in touch with Tom. And everybody, thank you for being here with us this evening. Have a good night and a peaceful night, and blessings to you all. Thank you.